Welcome to our functional training. Today, you're going to be learning what the process is regarding configuring dashboards.
For today, we're going to go through how to set up the dashboard using the access group. We'll go into how you can configure your own dashboard, both from a user, so an administrator or supervisor point of view, and then also from an employee point of view. Once we get through those two configuration parts, we'll go in and look at each individual dashboard gadget and come back to this PowerPoint. So in order to actually configure it by access group, we'll be jumping into the system. I'm just going to log in here. So I'm logging in as an administrator. So the first part here is going to be how do you configure what an access group can see and do when it comes to the different dashboard gadgets. And if you're not familiar with the terminology of a dashboard, the dashboard here is the first page people usually launch into when they come into the system. So this would be considered the dashboard, where it gives us some summary information about what's going on with our timesheets, time off requests, reports. I have a weather app on here as well. So we can configure what each access group can see on the dashboard. And in order to do that, we actually have to go into our menu. And then there's an access category itself. And then from here, there's a full page called Dashboard. Off on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see all your individual access groups. And then you can see whether they're listed as administrator, employee, or supervisor. And then depending on which one you click on will determine which list of gadgets you'll be able to give people access to. So anything under the available items, which I currently have none. Let's go back to the other one. You'll see this one does have 3, meaning people who are assigned to the administrator access group will not be able to see the message, proactive alert, or the public message on their dashboard, or they will not be able to enable those options. It's as if they don't even exist for this administrator access group. However, for my other administrator group, they have access to all of the dashboard gadgets. So as we look over to the right-hand side, we'll be able to see all the selected items. Basically, every gadget, anyone assigned to this group can have access to any of those administrator gadgets. I can add and remove items. So let's say we don't have time clock, so we don't need the push device status. I can just move it over to the left-hand side to remove it from that access group. Don't forget to save the page as you're making changes to this dashboard gadget configuration. And I'm just going to add it back just to show you. The order that the gadgets show over here on the right-hand side will be the order that they appear on the dashboard, depending on how enhanced you have your screen. So if I go back to mine really quick, my page is pretty enhanced, so I'm only seeing 2 gadgets per row. However, if I were to make it smaller, I'd have room over here for 1 more gadget. Or even smaller, I might have room for 2. And that really comes into play then with the ordering of them. So this one would, approaching overtime would be the top left. My point balance would be the top right, and so on and so forth, depending on what order they're in. It just helps you control where people see the gadgets. So the first step is identifying which gadgets. And again, we'll go through each of these individually and give you an explanation of what they do and how you can configure some of the additional properties of them. So you can pick and choose which gadgets each access group has access to. And then down below here in the next section is our dashboard settings. So the first checkbox here is allow dashboard configuration. Do we want people in this access group to be able to add or remove their gadgets or move them around? In this case, I have it checked, so I do. The secondary box here allows us to add external gadgets. So that weather gadget I had on the front for Maui, that was considered an external gadget. I'm pulling from an external website or additional information that might be programmed in here and showing it on the dashboard. I'm currently not allowing my users to add anything for their individual view because it is not checkmarked. Allow dashboard background image customization. So I do have this checked. So when we go in and start configuring our own dashboard, I would actually be able to pull a link from somewhere else on the internet and have that as my background for when I log into the system. Okay. And I'll actually go back to the dashboard and show you. So this cave look that we're pulling from back here, this is coming from a link in the internet somewhere and populating onto our dashboard. Now, if your organization is using the Leave Shared Calendar, which would allow supervisors and administrators to see multiple employees on a calendar view when they have time off, this allows you to configure if it's only for that user's assigned employees, if it's for all employees in the entire database, so really no restrictions, and then if it's by a specific group level that you would identify below. Most commonly, it's going to be based off of the assigned employees. So that way, Lucy as a supervisor would only see the 15 employees that she supervises. However, if you do have restrictions and employees work in multiple departments, it might sometimes be useful to use all employees, or even identifying it then by a specific group. The next section here allows you to configure the template of the dashboard. So where above we got to pick which dashboard gadgets actually are available to that access group, when I click into here, I can actually configure the individual gadgets themselves. So at the top part here is our preference. The lock side menu, when enabled, would keep your menu open every time, not every time, when you use it. So you would launch into the system, you'd click into your menu, and this menu would appear all the time. With it turned off, when you click onto a new page, the menu disappears. So when it's on, it'll stay open. When it's off, it'll close once you make a selection for a page. The auto launch dashboard, this will allow the system to, when you first log in, come to the dashboard. Mine should be turned on here. Otherwise, if it's turned off, it's either going to go to the first page you've saved as a favorite, or if you have no pages saved as favorites, it'll go to the first available page in the system. And I can identify that by just looking in my menu. So in this case, with the order of my categories, the first page it would come to is the pay code setup page under company setup. And then the last part in here is the auto refresh. So normally when you're sitting on a page within the system, let's say the timesheets, for example, if you just launch into that page and make no changes, the page just sits there. It doesn't refresh the data automatically unless you were to save or navigate around. And that's similar to how the dashboard would operate, except if you do change the auto refresh. So if you wanted the dashboard to refresh every 5 minutes, so you're sitting on the dashboard, making no changes, no clicking, not moving around the system. This means every 5 minutes, you're going to see the dashboard blink, and it's going to update those exceptions, the time off requests. This happens every time you come back to the dashboard, but if you wanted to just leave the dashboard open and refresh automatically, that's what this would do. And then down below in our dashboard setup, we get to come in here and for this access group, say yes or no to each of the gadgets. If a gadget is deselected, that means the users will not be able to see it directly on their dashboard unless they were to go into their individual setup and enable it. So I want the access group to have the option if they want to turn on the approaching overtime, but I don't want to mandate it on their dashboard. I could leave this unchecked. And then as we look down here, all of the gadgets. Okay. And then if you do allow customization for that background image, this is where the user would be able to go in and put in the URL. In addition to selecting and deselecting the gadgets in here, you can even customize how the gadgets operate. So as I click into an individual gadget, it's giving me that configuration. The assist panel, which was that top part of the page that shows all of our exceptions, our pending, approved, and declined time off requests, and where each of our timesheets are in that approval status. This allows us then to set settings like, do we want it to auto collapse? I have it turned off, which means when we launch to the dashboard, it'll be expanded. We can see all the details right then and there. If it's something I don't want to see all the time, I can auto collapse on. So that way it'll just show me the header and I can always click in to see the details if I need to. With the assist panel, it also gives us options to view some scheduling parts of it. I'm going to turn it on, and then again, it gives you the collapse option. And then because this gadget has 3 separate sections, the exceptions, the PTO status, and the timesheet status, it allows us to toggle those items on or off. So some organizations don't keep PTO requests, time off requests within the system, so they'll actually toggle it off for the access group because they don't need to see fields that they're not using. Or if maybe this is a supervisor access group who doesn't approve doesn't approve timesheets, you could turn off the timesheet status because it's not needed for this access group either. Always keep in mind that as you're coming in and customizing the overall, individual configuration setup for the gadgets, there is a separate save button. So you want to make sure you save it here. And then I always, just to be safe, save it at the very top of the page too. Okay, so let me turn PTO back on. I'm going to save it here and save it at the top. And then as we go to the next one here, it allows us to rename it. It allows us, in this case, for the approaching overtime, select different pay methods. And then this one's a little bit different than a lot of the other ones because it allows you to put in a threshold for when the employee will actually show up on the dashboard. So the approaching overtime gadget will look at the employee's timesheet and how many hours are recorded on there, and then show employees past this threshold. And as you can see, it's defaulted to 0. So if I go back to my dashboard, I'll have all of my employees on there, even if they don't have any hours. So this allows you to set that default threshold for this access group. And then when we go into the individual setup, we can set it for our individual view as well. Most of these, if they don't have any additional configurations, still allow you to change the name and the row count, and whether you want the gadget to start auto-collapsed or not. I'm just going to kind of click here so you can get a quick view. Okay. All right, I'm going to save one more time at the top, and then I'm going to click the exit here. Now, once you're done configuring the template for this access group, in order to publish it out to all of the users assigned to this access group, you do have to select the republish template. So this will actually do 2 things. One, it's going to push out all the templates and those unique configurations that we just went through to every user in this access group. And currently, it also removes any saved favorites for those individual users as that access group. And when I say the saved favorites, I mean those pages at the top of the page here that the user has saved as a favorite. So in this case, it would actually remove this page as my favorite once I republish the template. So just kind of keep that in mind if you're making changes to an existing access group where users may have customized their view or saved additional pages as favorites. And then the last part on here is the external gadget. So external gadgets are where it's pulling information from somewhere else on the internet and then putting it onto this dashboard. The external gadget does allow you to also add other information. So maybe I'm not pulling a website, but I'm just putting a notice on the dashboard. You could do that as well. So I'm just previewing it here. I wanted to bring it up on the screen. And it does require you to enter the data in HTML if you are pulling it from another website, or if I'm just going to add a new one. I'm actually just going to leave it as that. Nothing fancy. And then it does add itself up here at the top. So if you did want to remove it from specific access groups, you could as well. There we go. Okay, so again, just to refresh, what we're doing here is this is the configuration per access group. And then if we jump over to the employee one, you'll see that it's set up very similar, where you can select gadgets, put them over here for employees to use. It has a couple of different options that are different from the user, so the administrator and supervisor. In this case, it allows you to set it by default in icon view. So in this case, I'm going to pop back up the PowerPoint and just jump through everything we just talked about, because I wanted to show the difference between the gadget view and the icon view so you can look at them in side by side. The gadget view allows employees to see extended information on their dashboard. So leave management lets them see their available hours, pending requests. It allows them to see some simplified timesheet information for those examples. Whereas the icon view will just give them icons, and then clicking on the images in those icons will launch into the pages where you can then manage that information. So clicking on the leave management guy here with the little island will launch me into my request page where I can then make time off requests. Clicking on the little timesheet here will launch me into my full timesheet page where I can then review the information or manage my timesheet depending on my access to that page. The next page here, we can jump back into the system, is the option to allow configuration. So again, in this case, this would be allowing the employees to move their gadgets around. And then also the same thing with the external gadgets. And the last one here is to use the company setup EWS function key punch buttons. Now, what does this mean? When we look at the clock gadget, I'll actually just transition over to myself so we can look at it really quick. It'll show some buttons if we have the option to punch or access information from the web. So this is the default option in the system. So it's going to have a punch button, which will punch me in or out. So it's the swipe and go option, where once I punch, the system will look at my current timesheet and put it in the next available cell. And then a transfer option, which then can be configured based off of the employee's access group. Now, let's say you wanted to rename the punch button, or you wanted to have a separate punch in and punch out button. You can do that using the function key template. And you can only set one function key template per organization, so per database. And I'm just going to go, mine's all out of order. Company setup. I don't have access to that page. That's okay. We'll just bring up the PowerPoint again. So under the company setup system setup page, there is a specific tab called EWS key, which is function key. And this allows you then to customize the captions that appear that show up on that clock. It can also customize a specific link into your employee database if your employees are using that direct link into the timekeeping system. So this will specify a punch in button, a punch out button, and in this case also give them access to the web services, which they're already in by the time they get to that clock. All right, we're going to jump back in the database again. So this next part is just to show you how to set up your own unique. So in this case, I only have, let's see, my dashboard, so I'm extending it here. I know I've done it a couple times, but I haven't explained. So you'll see in each of your gadgets, like my approaching overtime, it has a minus bar right now. So if I wanted to collapse it and just keep the header on, I could hit that, and then it gives me, in this case, a count of how many employees are showing up. When you make a change to whatever is different from the default, it'll give you a little lock here. So if I wanted to save the auto collapse setting, so the next time I log in, the approaching overtime is minimized like this, then I would click the lock. And as I make a change to it, it'll show the lock again, and I can click that again to keep that setting for the next time I log in. Same thing here with my weather. Maybe I don't want that open. I'm in Wisconsin and I don't want to see what's going on in Maui. Or that external one that I just created on the whim here. Okay. To customize my own dashboard here, add some additional gadgets or remove some of these, I'm going to go to the avatar in the top rightish side of my page and then click into the settings. So this page is going to look exactly like it looked like when we were working with the access group, but now this is for my own individual access in the system, my own individual view. Same exact options as before. And now I can come in here and add my different gadgets. Let's take off that new one. Let's add in the reports, requests, and we'll do employee seniority. Okay, and just check marking these. I gotta save the page in order to customize them. And we'll change my approaching overtime because we did talk about this a little bit. I'm gonna change this to 24. So once my employees get 24 hours on their timesheets, they will show up on this gadget. This threshold has nothing to do with your overtime policy. This is more of just when employees are going to start reaching thresholds on their timesheet. If their overtime policy still states after 8 hours per day or 40 hours per work week, that still holds true. This is just for viewing the data on that dashboard. Yeah. So once I come in here and I customize that, save one more time, head back to my dashboard. Now I can see some of the extended. My employee seniority. I don't have any reports yet. And when I was talking about before being able to move gadgets around, as you hover over the white part on the header of any of these gadgets, you'll notice it creates those little like crosshairs. I can then click and drag the gadgets around to customize where I want them to show up. Okay. All right, and now as I go over to my employee side, the main difference between that user setup, the administrator and supervisor options, is we can also then enable that option for allowing employees to come in here and customize their own, and specifically this icon view. So I could have each individual employee could then pick whether they want to view the gadgets or the card view that gives you that extended information, or if they want the icon view. It's a cleaner dashboard, launches you to the same pages. It just doesn't give you those details as the gadget view or the card view does. Okay, so now I'm going to bring back up the PowerPoint and let's just go through each of the gadgets individually and I'll explain a little bit what each of them will do. So the first one on here is the approaching hours gadget. This is an employee only gadget. And this will then show employees as they're reaching their meal time configured by their shift, their scheduled hours based off of the schedule in the system for them, and then the weekly overtime as it's programmed for their policy. And then down below, it will also show their punch in and outs for that day. So in order to use the mealtime one, the shift does have to have some configuration built into that. Same thing with the scheduled work hours. They have to have a schedule or a shift in order to populate that field. And then of course, they also have to be the weekly overtime programmed in their policy in order for it to start counting towards that as well. As of right now, this is an all or nothing gadget. So you either have to see all these options or none of them by taking the gadget away. You can't pick and choose to only show the mealtime and not the scheduled work or the weekly overtime. The next one is that approach overtime. I know we've talked about this one quite a few times already. This is just to show you what it'll look like when there's actual data. And then also if you're using the elapsed time module, which will look at the current time and then when the employee punched in to give you an estimated or elapsed time from that last punch, it'll also include that information. And in this case, mine's color coded in a purple. And the question mark next to it just means the employee hasn't punched out yet, so it's not an exact calculation yet. The next one is the clock gadget, and this is an employee-only gadget as well. And this will show up on all dashboards. It will show you the current time, possibly give the employees options to punch or transfer depending on their access, but it will always show when they clocked in last, when it's in or out. So whether the employee is punching from that mobile app or punching from a time clock or punching from the website, it will still pull in their punch wherever it's coming from. Employee Seniority is a user-only gadget. So this will look at the individual user's access to employee and then calculate the seniority based off of their hire date. And what's nice about this one is that each of the headers are sortable. So right now it's clicked on employee ID and it's showing me in order. But if I wanted to click on the duration, I could click here and it would resort my employees to show me people who have worked here the least amount of time or people who have worked here the most amount of time. The exception summary gadget could be shown on both the employee and the user dashboards. When it's set for an employee, it'll show the individual employee's exceptions as they appear on the timesheet. When it's set for user, it'll count for all of the employees that user has access to. If there are no exceptions to show, it shows the gadget still, but it doesn't show any exceptions in here. So this is telling us right now that for the employees this user has access to, there are 3 unclaimed punches and there are 4.08 hours of overtime. If this was for the individual employee view, it would say that this employee has 4.08 hours of overtime and this employee individually has 3 unclaimed punches. The next one is the expense info gadget. This one can be activated if you're using the expense module in the system. It's a user-only gadget, and it's meant to show where the expenses are in the approval. So in this case here, it's showing, I have one open. It's showing me the amount off to the right-hand side, and then it'll show me as it moves through the different statuses. The next one is the FMLA active cases gadget. This is a user-only gadget, and you must be using the FMLA module in order for it to be active. This will show you all of the current active FMLA cases in the system, start and end time, and then also the days and calendar. So what days are the employees having off for this leave? That last column shows the status. So based off of how many different tasks this FMLA case has, it'll tell you how many have been completed. The exclamation point next to it says that something's overdue. And then you can click on any of these cases and it'll launch into that full page so you can see exactly what's going on. The leave management gadget is an employee-only gadget. This is the actual extended card gadget view. It has a couple of neat things in here in the fact that you can request time off directly using the gadget by using the request leave button. Brings up that second screen that lets the employee configure their time off request and submit it. It of course will also show the available balance for any of their leave requests that they have access to see. There is a forecasting checkbox right above the pay code column, and that will allow employees to see forecasted amounts based off of your accrual configuration. It allows employees to send reminders to their supervisors if there is one programmed for them, which sends an internal message within the system and can show up on the message gadget. And then at the very last part of it, it's going to show where the status of each of the requests are for the current pay period and into the future. So we can see we have 1 approved requests. That one has the green check mark, and we have 1 pending request, which shows that yellow exclamation point. The next one is the Leave Shared Calendar gadget. This is an employee-only gadget. The Leave Shared Calendar allows employees to see when other employees within their department or location or job have approved time off. So in this case, for this employee, one of their other coworkers actually has approved time off on Friday, July 23rd. So they can see that before they go in and make a request. This gadget can be programmed to include the pay codes or not include the pay code. So in this case, Ashley, we know she is off for 8 hours, but we don't know if this is vacation or sick or funeral leave or jury duty. We just know that she's off. The message gadget is an employee and user gadget. It's going to show any messages that are being produced within the system. So for users, this is going to be employee time off requests. If you are ever set up as a delegate, those private messages or those reminder messages sent by the employee. And then for the employees, this is going to be responses back for time off requests or private messages sent by their supervisor to them directly. Some of those messages can also be sent in email form, so you would actually get them in both places. And then clicking on any of these messages will launch you into the full message page. The point balance gadget is a user-only gadget, and you have to be using the points module in order for it to activate. This will then show you how many points an employee has within each of the different point rules. So if you do have multiple rules, one of those additional configuration pieces allows you to go in and activate or deactivate which rule you want to see. So in this case, I only have one point rule. It's called points. And then we can see that Ashley has some points, Janine has points, and Kelly has none. The next one is a relatively new gadget, and it's called the Proactive Alerts gadget, and it is a user-only gadget. This is set up to give you information about any failed automation. So in this case, we can see that there was an employee import that had failed on January 11th, and then one of the reports was scheduled to email out, and that failed as well, and that failed on January 5th. And we're gonna skip past that one. The next one in here is the public message gadget. This is available to users and employees. This will show public messages that other administrators have produced in the system and populated out to the selected users or employees. It also will include messages from the system in terms of, in this case, updates needed. Public messages also show up on the main login pages if you're using the direct link into the time system and not using single sign-on from another source. The push device status is a user-only gadget, and it's talking about your time clocks, basically, or any kind of news configuration going between two different systems. So in this case here, I have 3 clocks available to me, clock 1, clock 2, and an NT7000, older clock. So this can tell us the version number in the operating system. Most importantly, it's going to tell us that elapsed time. And just in case you don't know, so time clocks are set up to communicate with the software at a minimum of every 24 hours to make sure everything's up to date and everything's communicating. Once it goes past a certain threshold, in this case mine is 24 hours, it'll start showing that elapsed time in red. So in this case, I can see that somebody just used clock 1 a minute ago, working. Somebody used clock 2 56 minutes ago. And it looks like my old NT7000 clock hasn't communicated in about 3.5 days. So I have to go take a peek to see what's going on with that clock. The next, the schedule gadget here is an employee-only gadget, and this will show employees what their schedule is in the system, populated from their shift, or if it's been a manually created schedule from their supervisor, or even if they have approved time off. So there's 2 different views. You can either view it weekly, like the picture on the left, or daily, like the picture on the right. The time off request gadget is a user-only gadget, and this is going to show you employees who have pending and approved or pending requests in the system. There's some configuration you can do with this. On the image I have on the top left-hand side, we're actually viewing pending and approved. So if you look at July 23rd, you're going to see a number 1 in blue and a number 1 in red. When I clicked into that day, it produced image on the right-hand side, which is showing me that Kelly has a pending request for vacation and Ashley has an approved request for vacation under that leave shared. So the number of employees that have a record on that day will then show in the cell. So if I had 5 employees requesting off on July 30th, I would see a 5 in that field, and it'd probably be a different color based off of how many employees I need to change that color. The next one is the time off request approval gadget, which again is a user-only gadget. Kind of similar to the calendar view. This one will show you all of those approved requests. Same information in the fact that it tells you the dates, the pay codes, the number of hours. But the only main difference one is this posted status off to the top right, to the right-hand side of the gadget. Posted means did it post to the timesheet? You're going to want it to say yes. If it does say no, there's maybe some things to look at. So if it does say a no on here, that means either your rules are set not to post this approved date until maybe the week it happens. And then you would have a separate, posting running for that. Or maybe someone deleted the time off request directly on the timesheet altogether. That would then mark it as a no posted. Or your organization allows insufficient balances to be approved. So my request was approved, but I didn't have 8 hours, so it couldn't populate it on my timesheet. The next one is the timesheet gadget, and this is the employee only. So this will give the employee that simplified view of their punches or records on the timesheet for that pay period. And in this case, I also have submit options for this employee to agree or disagree based off of their settings. The next one here is the unprinted points document. This, of course, you will need the points module in order to use this. So some organizations will have their points set up where once an employee reaches a certain threshold of hours, it can auto-generate a report with some filled-in data, employee name, number of points, reason of the points, custom language that the supervisor can then click on, review, print, have the employee sign if necessary. The unprinted point documents just means that Ashley has a new document here that nobody's looked at yet. So someone needs to come in here and run it and review it to make sure that the communication happens. Once you click on an option here, so if I were to click on this line item and look at the report, it would disappear from this gadget. Okay, and the last one in here is the user reports gadget. And this is a user-only gadget as well. And this will show any saved or published reports in the system, whether you created it yourself and saved it just for your own view, or if you've created it and shared it to other people, or if somebody else created it and shared it to you. So the important part on this one is looking at the report scope off to the right-hand side. Knowing that a user-only report means that I can make any customization to the settings I want once I get into the properties of it. That shared report means that somebody else created it or I created it and shared it to someone else, and I can basically just view the information without being able to customize any of the settings from that view. The only other thing I haven't really talked about on the individual gadgets themselves is the little navigational arrow here. So just to the right of where it says user reports, if I wanted to launch into the full user reports page to see all of the capabilities of that, I would click on that navigational arrow and it would launch me into that page. So as I scroll up and we go through back all of the gadgets we looked at, you'll notice that all of the gadgets have that except the clock. And that way, as you're looking at the data, if you need more information, if you have access to that full page, it will then launch you into that so you can see all of the details. Okay. My final remarks for the dashboard gadgets is when you have them on your dashboard, don't be afraid to start clicking on things. Dashboard gadgets are just notifications. Basically, they're giving you some information. So once you click on something, if you don't like what you see, just close out of the box, click back to the dashboard if you launch away to a page you don't know how to get back to. Kind of play with moving them around or using your own settings to customize it. Okay, all right, Lucy, are there any questions that we'd like to bring to the group?
The main question that kept coming up was administrators who did not have access to the dashboard menu. And so if you can just briefly just show them where you can change it to full access, because some people had restricted access and some people didn't have access at all. If we can just show our attendees. Thank you.
You got it. All right, let me flip back to my administrator view. Now we were in the access category earlier when we were looking at setting up the dashboard, so I am going to go back there. because that access category is what gives me access to the pages, the categories, the tabs, read-only full access. So if you want to be able to manage that dashboard page, first check your page menu. So I'm just going to look once it launches in here for my access group. It's thinking, there we go. So let's go to administrator access. And then once that launches up, I'm going to search or look for my access category, which is down here for me. And then make sure that you have the checkbox here. Okay, once it's checked here, then I'm going to go back to the top of the page and there's a page access option at the top. So now once you activate the page, going into the page access will then allow you to set it to full access so you can actually make modifications to it. So let's go to the access category. So I clicked on access up here, and then you'll want to make sure that you have full access to the dashboard itself. Once you do this, you may need to log out and log back in before you see that page or before you now have full access to that page.
Perfect. Thank you, Crystal, so much for showing our attendees how to enable this. And if anyone on the call still has any issues or needs any assistance, please feel free to contact our support team. If you're still going through the implementation process, then please work with your consultant to enable that piece of the system. But other than that, we thank you for your time today. It was great to engage with you today and get to know you a little better. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And we look forward to having everyone in our future webinars. Have a fantastic day and a fabulous week, everyone. Thank you for your time.